They say every door in that house was a question, a plea, a barrier against the silence that followed the sound of the rifle. Sarah Winchester built not a home, but a labyrinth for the dead, and the only way to keep them pacified was to never, ever stop the sound of the hammer. In 1886, in the fog-shrouded valleys of San Jose, California, a mansion began to grow. Its owner was Sarah Winchester, heir to the rifle fortune, a fortune baptized in blood. After the deaths of her infant daughter and her husband, she was adrift in a sea of grief, and the tide that pulled her was a voice from the other side. A Boston medium told her the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle were haunting her. Their anger was a cancer in her blood. The only cure: move west. Build a house for them. Build it forever. Add room upon room, corridor upon corridor, to confuse the malevolent ones. Stop building, and you would join the ghosts you sought to placate. But this is not a story about why. This is about a night in 1922, mere months after Sarah herself had passed. The house was silent for the first time in 38 years. A young historian, Arthur Phelps, was granted access to catalog the estate. He was a man of reason, of ledgers and lists. He laughed at the stories of the saint's room, of the stairs that led to ceilings, of the doors that opened onto two-story drops. It was in the dead of night, his work almost done, that he found it. A small door, hidden behind a wardrobe in the servants' quarters. A door not on any blueprint. His lamp flickered as he pried it open, the oil low. The air that spilled out was frigid, and carried the scent of old rain and gunpowder. And then he saw them. The names. Dozens of them. Annie Taylor, died 1874. John Little Bear, died 1889. And beside each name, a single phrase, written over and over until the charcoal had worn grooves into the wood: I am sorry. He was not alone. The lamp guttered and died. Darkness, absolute and suffocating. He scrambled back, but the small door was gone. His hands met only a smooth, cold wall, and in that ghastly light, he saw them. Not full forms, but impressions in the stale air. The glint of a brass button, the frayed edge of a cavalry uniform, the hollow stare from a shadow where a face should be. They were all around him, pressing in. The cold was not of temperature, but of absence. The silence between the whispers was a weight. He heard a new sound, then, separate from the whispers, the clear, desperate sound of a woman, weeping, and a single, choked sentence that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. The building must never stop. They found Arthur Phelps the next morning, babbling and clutching a piece of charcoal. He was committed to a sanatorium a week later, where he would spend the rest of his days. He never spoke of what he saw, only of what he heard, and what he felt. The cold. But the foreman who secured the house after the incident, he found something new, something that hadn't been there before Arthur went in. Scratched into the paneling beside the hidden door, as if by a frantic, terrified hand, were two words: the hammers have been silent at the Winchester house for a century. The tours walk the endless halls by day, but if you ever find yourself standing near its walls after dark, when the fog rolls in from the bay, listen. Past the wind, past the settling of old timber, you might just hear it, the faint, desperate scratch of a new wall being built from the inside. Arthur Phelps heard their apologies. He felt their cold, but he missed their true purpose. The spirits of the Winchester house were not just seeking shelter. They were waiting for an architect. Decades after Arthur Phelps was led away from that house, his notes were sealed, his story dismissed as the ravings of a man broken by grief and suggestion. But the house never relinquishes its hold entirely. It simply waits for a new key. Dr. Ilara Vance saw what others did not. Not in sciences, but in schematics, in the insane, beautiful logic of the blueprints. The house, she argued, was a sentence, a prayer written in wood and nail. And Arthur Phelps had found a missing word. Using ground-penetrating radar and Arthur's charcoal-smeared notes as a guide, she secured a private, overnight research permit. Her goal was simple: to find the structural truth. She brought no medium, no priest, only her instruments, a camera, and a conviction that stone and wood cannot lie. She found the hidden door easily now, knowing where to look. But behind it, the tiny closet of apologies was different. The wall at the back, the one Arthur said was smooth and cold, was now crudely broken open. Splintered planks hung loose, as if something had forced its way out. Descending was like stepping into a different century. The air was wet, cold, smelling of the earth and rusted iron. Her light fell upon a chamber that defied all her plans. It was circular, its walls not of wood, but of packed clay and stone. And in the center stood a single, impossible object, a blacksmith's forge, cold for decades. Yet the anvil was stained a dark, sinister brown. It was then her flashlight died. Not a flicker, a sudden, absolute death. But the room was not dark. A faint, phosphorescent green glow began to pulse from the symbols on the walls. And in that sickly light, She saw the source of the dripping. Water was seeping from the clay, but as it ran down the walls, it thickened, turning the color of the stain on the anvil. The room was not a memorial, it was a workshop. The spirits weren't lost souls seeking apology. They were angry craftsmen, demanding their tools be put to use once more. The legacy of the rifle was not death, but creation, and they needed a living hand to complete their work. A compulsion washed over her, a need deeper than fear, to take the tools, to feel the cold metal, to complete the pattern, to add her own piece to the eternal, damned architecture of the house. The whispers became a chant, a single, hammering thought. Build, contains, arm. She never spoke of the forge, or the liquid rust, or the spectral blueprint burned into her mind. Her report cited structural anomalies and unverified sensory phenomena, but she could not escape the compulsion, the need to build. She now builds, you see, small, perfect replicas. Dozens of them. She tells herself it's a form of therapy, a way to master fear. But if you were to examine the latest model, the one still wet with glue on her desk, you would see something new, something that never existed in the real house. A tiny, perfectly crafted stone tower, emerging from the roof, its single, narrow window looking less like a window, and more like the barrel of a gun. The widow was built to confuse the dead. Arthur Phelps heard their sorrow, but Alara Vance learned the terrible truth. The house was never a sanctuary, it was an arsenal. And the spirits aren't resting, they're simply waiting for the right builder to finish what they started. Every house has its foundation, every curse, its source. We believed the spirits sought an architect, a builder, but we were wrong. They sought a heart, a living, beating engine to power their terrible machine. And in Alara Vance, they found one. Alara Vance vanished from public life. Her colleagues assumed a breakdown, a retreat into academia. But she had not retreated, she had been consumed. The house's blueprint was now a cancer in her mind, replicating, mutating. She was no longer studying the curse, she was building a new vessel for it, brick by psychic brick. She stopped seeing the spirits as ghosts. She saw them as colleagues. The cavalry officer with his shattered jaw pointed out flaws in her load-bearing calculations. The pioneer woman, her dress stained dark, would weep approvingly at a perfectly joined seam. They were no longer haunting her, they were collaborating. The final design came to her in a fever dream, a central chamber, a heart for the house. Not a saint's room for speaking to the dead, but an engine room for powering them. It required a core, a focus, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her more than any ghost, where to find it. The circular room was waiting, the forge was cold, the anvil clean. The whispering had stopped. It was silent as a tomb, because they knew she had come to finish the work. From her bag, she did not pull out tools of wood or metal. She pulled out artifacts, a locket of her own hair, a photograph of her parents, their faces scratched out, a vial of her own blood. She was not building with lumber, she was building with memory, with loss, with life. She thought she was giving the house a heart, but a heart needs to beat. And as the amber light pulsed, she felt a terrible, sympathetic rhythm in her own chest. A pulling, a drain. The house wasn't just using her ideas, it was feeding on her very life force, siphoning her breath to give voice to its dead, her strength to swing their spectral hammers. At that moment, the final piece of Sarah Winchester's plan was revealed. It was never about confusion, it was about conversion. She wasn't building a labyrinth to trap the dead, she was building a factory to process grief of her own, and that of every soul claimed by the rifle, and transform it into something permanent, into architecture. Alara wasn't the next architect, she was the final component, the new core. The pulling sensation in her chest ceased. The silence returned, but it was a different silence. It was a satisfying silence, a full silence. The work was done, the engine was complete, and she was now a permanent, living part of its machinery. Alara Vance was never seen again. The official report lists her as a missing person, but if you take the tour today, and you listen past the guide's rehearsed stories, you might feel it. A sense of peace in the chaos, a strange, warm hum in the walls. The house is finally, truly, alive. And if you place your hand on the wood in the quietest corner of the servants' quarters, you can feel it. A slow, steady, comforting pulse. The widow's curse was not that the building must never stop. Her redemption was that it finally, mercifully, could. All it needed was a new heart to call its own. So the hammers are silent now. The apologies have been accepted, and the house is breathing.